everyone, welcome back to The Hard Way. Today I'm going to condense about 2 weeks worth of demolition into 10 minutes and kind of narrate over the top, giving you tips and tricks and kind of explain what I'm doing along the way. Hope you guys enjoy. So the first thing we did when we got the bus into position was to remove the heaters from the bus. To do this we had to close 2 ball valves in the engine bay, and that keeps all the coolant that is in the radiator from flowing down through the coolant lines into the cabin of the bus. We used a 20-gallon tote to catch all the fluid from the lines and the radiators. We ended up saving both the hoses and the heaters from the bus, and we used one of the heaters as a supplemental cooler for the engine coolant system that we can just turn on whenever we need to. And by far the messiest part is cutting the lines and removing the lines that are underneath the driver's station, because those run up to the front heater. After we removed the heaters, the next thing we did was to pull up all of the original flooring of the bus. We did this primarily to save weight and just get rid of the stuff that we weren't going to use. We wanted to insulate the floor, so getting all of the original wood and vinyl up was pretty important. This also allowed us to inspect the actual steel floor of the bus for any rust spots. To get the floor up, we first used a big breaker bar to kind of just peel up all the vinyl and center striping or center aisle in the floor. And that was probably the harder part, because after we got the vinyl pulled up, we could just unscrew the original screws for the bus floor for the plywood. And most of those came up nice, and if they didn't, we just pried up the floor around them and then ground off the heads of the screws. But we ended up actually using some of that plywood because it was in decent enough condition for other projects within the bus. Once we got the plywood up, we were able to sweep out the bus for the first time and get rid of about 20 pounds of Arizona desert dust. The next thing we did was to take an angle grinder and grind off all of the screws that were stripped out that held the plywood down. I thought I got them all the first time, but they were everywhere, and they were kind of a constant trip hazard and knee hazard. After we got that done, I started tearing apart the engine bay doghouse. So there you can see the original access for the engine bay. It's not great. And then we're also getting rid of the engine cowlings for the air intakes on both sides, so we can add another row of windows. So my basic methodology here was just to grind off all of the rivet heads and screw heads. There were some screws that would work, and that was the easiest way to take them out. But a lot of them were just rusted up or stripped out, so the angle grinder was my best friend for this phase of the demo. You've probably already noticed, but before we started the demo, we actually removed all of the windows from the bus that we could. We did this because we didn't want to damage them using like crowbars or hitting them with stuff and cracking them. And we also wanted to protect as many of them as we could from welding, spatter, and sparks, and grinding sparks, because that can actually pockmark and kind of damage the windows in ways that you wouldn't want them to be damaged. Removing the cowlings actually turned out to be kind of a challenge, as they had fasteners inside the bus and inside the engine bay that you had to remove. This is probably a great time to mention that one of the bigger dangers that comes with demo and fabrication work is a fire hazard from something that's been smoldering and catches fire after you leave the project for the night or when you're done. So I always gave myself plenty of time, like a half hour to an hour after I finished cutting and grinding, to just kind of clean up and plan the next day kind of in my head before I left the shop. That gave any embers a chance to either catch fire or go out before I left and wasn't there to catch them then. So that's something that a lot of people don't think about, but is a very dangerous part of the fabrication demo process. So by this time I was sick of grinding rivets, so I decided to take the air conditioners out from inside the cabin of the bus. Originally we had planned to reuse a lot of this air conditioning equipment and use it in the final build, but by the time I factored in all the cost of running new lines and getting the system up and going again and recharged, I decided just to go with normal air conditioner for the bus. But yeah, I saved it all, so if I need it for a future project, I have it. So the air conditioners were held up with 4 bolts. They're fairly simple to get to. So how I did this was you first unhook, there's 2 coolant lines. Make sure your system is evacuated first so you don't have any coolant leaking out into the atmosphere. Then there's, on the electrical line, there's a grounding wire that is attached up behind it. Get that out of there before you pull your unit out. That way it's not holding you up or keeping you from taking the unit down once you get the bolts out. And on this side of the bus, these bolts were the threads here are quite long. I couldn't get my socket on it. On the other side, that was much easier to get to. So yeah, so now both of these are out. The next step is to get the electrical unhooked either from down there or up on the unit itself. That way we can get the hoses out, and then we'll get underneath the bus and pull the actual compressor units and all that out of there. So should be fun. The shop that we were working in had these wonderful high lift jacks, which made the demo and fabrication process a breeze. You basically just put one jack on each corner of the bus and you can lift them up all at the same time. And this allows for really convenient working conditions underneath the bus. You don't have to be on a creeper. You can just stand up and work at eye level. Once the bus was up in the air, it was easy to pull all of the lines out for the air conditioning system. They had a bunch of them because they had 2 condensers and 3 air conditioning units, and then the compressor was in the engine bay. So there are lines going back and forth every which way. But once we got them all off, I was thinking about saving everything, so I had it all capped and protected, but I ended up just removing them a year later. So one of the things I wish I had done differently was just to get rid of all these hoses right away. Even though I had pressure washed the bus pretty thoroughly before I started doing all this demo, you can still see all this red Arizona dust that kept falling off of all the hoses. All this dust made the demo process kind of a pain. Definitely needed to have safety glasses on. One of the nice things with having the bus up in the air also is that I could use this transmission pulling jack that is meant for semi-truck use, but you can basically just strap whatever you want to lift up to the jack and then use it to lower, like these giant condenser units. You can just lower them to the ground without having to lift them. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video, and I'll catch you on the next one.